Hello. Oh, good morning. What the hell? I have a new version of Studio Display Camera. What the hell is that? Anyways, yeah. So it's like this is just for fun. This is not like this is just exploring um, hooks in React and how it's kind of messed up our brains and how they didn't have to. Um, And I think it's because I remember when React came out and they were defending the reconciler, that you leaned on immutability, right? Um, so that's why all these hooks, they have dependency arrays, because it's a comparison thing for the hook to know when it's going to run again. And that's because React is so heavily leaning into immutability, which makes a shit ton of sense for the actual reconciler, right? That you have these immutable nodes, like virtual DOM nodes. That makes a shit ton of sense. And immutability is amazing for systems can become way more reliable if they're immutable. And for a virtual DOM implementation, immutability makes a shit ton of sense. But when you go up an abstraction and you're actually expressing UI and state, I want to argue that immutability becomes a bad thing. It makes things so much harder to reason about and so much harder to express, and it has a performance issue that I want to argue like React shouldn't have made hooks work the way they do. But this again, this is for fun. So what we're gonna do is that we're gonna just build a project called Observing React, and I haven't prepared any of this, so we're probably gonna get stuck somewhere. But the point is that we're gonna keep like exposing kind of the good hooks from React, and then we're gonna replace the bad hooks. And the first bad hook from React is useState. And the reason it's bad is not really it's not a signature, like having that array that the structure. But if you remember back in the day, when you had a class component, you would say counter, and then you would have this object that was your state, right? So you always thought about your state as an object, but now you think about your state as values. And the problem with that is that, like, it leans into the immutability thing. So when they're values, it makes sense because you want to put those values into dependency arrays. Like, just talking about this just says a lot about how much overhead hooks and immutable state management in React has given us. But it makes sense in that world. But it was a beautiful thing to be able to like think about your state as just an object, but still, like, when components were classes, you would still have to like immutably update that state object. Morning, Adam. Thanks for the emotional support this morning. I just need some understanding and recognition for being a parent. So that's much appreciated. But anyways, so what we're going to explore here is just creating these new hooks. And they're going to be based on observation instead of what's it called? Immutability. Let's see. Well, before we do that, we're just going to copy over a couple of things. We're going to copy over these two plugins here, and we're going to use Observing React here, and we're going to use Observing React here, and then we're going to also export Observer from Bonsify. So this just sets us up for let's see, observation. Oh, read yarn. yeah, we're gonna do some linkage here. Let's see. Just 2 seconds. I didn't prepare everything. Link. Is this where this is where I just link, and then I can go to Vite project yarn link observing React. And now I should be able to do import observing React is from observing bubble plugin. I'm not sure about the typing there. Is it just because of TS? Oh, that's interesting. Cannot find module. I thought this would work. Oh, I haven't built it yet. Now I think it's gonna pop up. There we go. So bubble plugins. So this is the thing that just makes all components observers so that we don't have to think about it. And then what we're going to explore is like, okay, how would an actual use state hook look like if React chose to use observing components as opposed to leaning on immutability all the way to the surface? Yeah, maybe we can we even run this? And then let's see. And then we have this other one where we're gonna, let's see. Oh, localhost. Is it running on? Oh, there, there it was. Okay, cool. So we have that thing running, and now we're gonna do. So one thing I'm not quite sure of here is that, let's see, we're gonna actually remove React here. Let's see how this is gonna work. The point is that I want to make sure that it doesn't actually like import from React. And maybe this is not like, this is the biggest concern I have if this was ever to be a thing, is that you'll be able to import use state from 2 different packages, which is just horrible, right? So I don't think, yeah, like this will never see the light of day anyways, but it's just fun to explore it. Let's see. Okay. So the way this use state would work is that now you actually need to have a record of string any. Well, it's actually, I'm not sure if there's even a, I think it's like T is probably just a T in use state. So it doesn't constrain you to certain values. So we'll do the same here. And then the state would be T. And then you also have the callback thing. But let's not deal with that now. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to say reactive read-only reactive state. That's the only thing we're going to do. Hello, good morning. Oh yeah, aliases. Yeah, exactly. Okay, but let's see if we can get a good flow here. So I'm gonna build. Does that mean I can now start? Yeah, it did update at least. So let's look at the app. So instead of using use state here, we're gonna do counter use state, and then we're gonna, let's see what it says. Oh, it says from React. I think I might have to manually, yeah, doesn't matter. That's a whole different issue. Observing, oh, it's not even here. That's weird. Observing, oh, it is there. It's just that. Okay, so we're going to use this one instead. And then what we're going to do, we're going to say increase this.count plus plus. So the whole point here is that with this use state, you use an object and you also include any methods for changing that state. Because this counter here, this is read only. You can't go and say, and we can even try it. So we can do counter count, and then we can try to do like, because this is an important thing, right? Counter.count plus plus. Let's see what happens. So let's bring up the, oh, look at that. Cannot mutate a read-only object, right? So this is like protected state. But if I do counter increase, oh, cannot. Why didn't that work? Why didn't that work? Oh. Oh, wait. Yeah, now I remember. Ah, yeah, that's why I'm doing the thing. Okay. We need to change the implementation a bit. Reactive state is that thing. And then we need to bind yeah, so in this case it is running rerunning. So we can do like let's see, what was I thinking about? I was thinking about doing React use state, and then you would like do the thing inside it, because there is no reason to, let's see, port star from React. Oh, as React from React. What was I doing? Yeah, and then let's see. Return reactive state. Let's see. So the thing that's happening here now is that this thing is tied to, because we're accessing the increase method through the read-only proxy, and then the this binding becomes the read-only proxy. It doesn't point to the internal reactive reference, which is correct. It should do that. And I don't really want to. Okay, I'm just going to do a hack for now. So for key in state, yeah, exactly. This is exactly what I wanted to do. I wonder why this is so. Oh, I think we can do this instead. Oh, sorry. Reactive state. My bad. Okay, so we're just overriding them, binding the this to it, which is fine. Okay, let's try again. Yeah, and we don't actually need to do this. This should happen inside here. Oh my god. Return. Sorry. The point isn't the implementation detail. Let's see. Yeah, so now we can change it. So that's kind of nice. And the whole point of this is that now you only have this use state thing where you shove everything that's like your state and methods to change that state. So you don't have like use reducer, and you don't split up your state values into many different values in the scope of the component. You actually put your state and the management of that state into like one thing. And that's how we're like, as JavaScript developers, not being exposed to React, that's how we think about defining state and changing state. So it's much, much simpler. And it's still like protected. You have predictable changes and all of that. And you can also do like async stuff here. No worries. That's fine. And that's also good. It's like, if you do something async and the component unmounts, that's fine, because you're just changing this object. It's not like, because you're not observing the object anymore, right? Because the component had ship it. Because the component doesn't observe the object anymore. So it doesn't matter. Unlike what normally happens with set state is that you're changing the state of a component that has unmounted. So it becomes a problem, right? But now you don't have to think about that. So that's also nice. And then yeah, so the only thing that I was reflecting on here is like you're using the this reference, which kind of sucks. That's the only thing I don't like about this. Which, like, when we're using the Bonsify project directly, you wouldn't point to this. You would kind of point to the counter. But you can't point to the counter here because the counter is read-only. So you would kind of have to have an internal representation of the counter, which means that you would kind of have to do, you would more manually, like, I'm not sure how you would actually express that. So if you were going to do this manually with like Bonsify, you would kind of do state reactive count 0 increase state count, and then you would return reactive.read-only state. That's how you would kind of manually do it. And I really like this, but the problem is like, it's so much more overhead than, like, you're exposed to the observability primitives, but here you're not exposed to that, right? But you're exposed to the this keyword, which is fine. Like, it's just JavaScript, it's not that, but and maybe it is fine. But then you have, yeah, maybe it is fine. And that's also interesting. Like, that's even like for the Bonsify project. Like, you could say that blip reactive, like, this is actually read-only always. You can't change anything that you return from reactive. But when you point to a function, so when you run through blip here, it's through the read-only proxy. But if you point to a function, that function will bind this, like, it will bind this to the reactive reference. So you kind of just get it all out of the box. That's really interesting. But then again, you can't choose, right? Maybe you want to be able to change it reactively from the outside. So that's a tricky one. Like, even here, maybe you wanted to change count from the outside. Currently here, you can't do that because I'm forcing it to be read-only. Um, yeah, and that's kind of a like if you deal with a form, for example, like you have just a bunch of different fields, right? And you just want to sync the state of them. Like having to create a method for every single value just to change it, that's a hassle, right? So it's very interesting, like local state here, that could definitely be didn't have to be read only, right? But if you were to like pass that object somewhere, that's the interesting thing. There is a difference between something you intend to consume locally and something you intend to share with others. If that's a nested component or it's coming from a context, like it doesn't matter. It's like it's two different things. And it's like conceptually what you say, Adam. It's like, do you want this to be read only or do you want it to be mutable? Or do you simplify it? Do you just say use state, but it's all read only, and you actually have to create methods for changing the state? Like you can do that to kind of simplify the surface, so you don't have to make those decisions. It's made for you. But if you're going to do a form, that's going to be a little bit more of a hassle, right? It's very interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting. Do, 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 do. Yeah, forms would suck. Yeah, and it's also like it's the accessibility of things, right? It's so accessible to just being able to expose the count and change it. But then you kind of just want to say no. So what you could do though is like, okay, by default, okay, it's just fun to play with APIs. So what we're gonna do, either you do a state or you're gonna do a read only. So that's gonna be state t and it returns t. Okay, so what we could do is like, where's the read only thing? Oh yeah, I didn't return read only here. That's funny. Okay, so what you rather do instead is like if type of state equals function, I'm gonna do this thing. Yeah, we kind of have to do this. No, wait, how would this work? No, now we can't. Yeah, this kind of sucks. We can't. We don't have the freedom to like do whatever here. Yeah, I think it does make sense to do that. Like at least as default behavior, right? Because it's correct. Like you shouldn't just change values. You should have like when you define some state, you should also define how that state can change so that you have that like one snapshot in your mind when you look at that piece of state. You don't have to go and read the consumption of the state to understand how it can change. You just have everything right there. So it's a good thing. But the problem is it's forms. Yeah, it's like it's forms. Forms suck because they have so many values, and you just want to be able to. By the way, this is going to be reactive read only. Let's see. It's nice to just be able to change the fields. Does this still work now? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but one thing I want to change in Bonsify, change in Bonsify. Read only still use reactive reference on methods. Yeah, so you can still use the this reference in Bonsify. Yeah, but what I really like about Bonsify is that you have this closure. So you can you explicitly say I'm pointing to this reactive reference, and anything can point to it. And you can also do things like you can have increase, and then you can put increase here, and then you can still point to counter, right? This is an amazing thing because here it's super weird that you point to this, right? So you can't split out your functions when you use the this keyword, which is a really bad thing in this style of programming. It works in classes, right? Because when you split out your functions, that's kind of what you always do, right? Because you have methods. They all have access to this binding. So this is the thing I was hoping to kind of solve is what if this counter is like a hook, right? Use function use, oh my God, function use counter. And then you will kind of do this thing, right? Where you put the increase somewhere else because, and then you should be able to do this. But then you need to do read only if you want to do that. This is kind of what I'm getting at, is that you should be able to do this. So you can still do this very simple this.count, and then it makes sense to make it default read only. But when you get into this situation, you're using a closure to protect your state. And then you just want to make anything you return from this closure read only. While everything inside the closure should be able to do things with this state. So having that explicit read only makes a lot of sense to me. But that doesn't fit with the use state. It doesn't fit with use state. Because you never want, yeah, that's my point. If you never want to define its read-onliness with the hook itself, it's something you want to define based on how that state is actually consumed or exposed, I mean. Yeah, so you could have use read-only. I guess. Yeah, okay, we're just going to do that for now. Because this is... yeah, I don't think you need all this code, mister. Return reactive read-only state. This is enough. It doesn't matter if this runs multiple times. If it's already a proxy, it won't do anything with it. Why isn't it able to... oh, I have to build it first. Oh, did we change the implementation now? No, now we always make it read-only. Yeah, and then we don't need this thing. Yeah, so now we can do the thing here. Now this is much cleaner. Yeah. Okay, this is definitely better. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's definitely better. Does it pick it up? Oh, look at that. It actually picked it up. Okay, so let's see. We have our counter, and currently we can like we can change it. But we could even do like, let's just do this. Let's call it state, and then we have state.count plus plus. Yeah, exactly. When it's local, it's yeah, that's the whole point. Exactly. Like when it's local, you don't need those constraints because you're already in the closure where the state is being used, right? It's when it's at the point of exposure to another closure. Yeah, that's it. That's the point where you need to decide, do I want this other stuff to also be able to change this or not? And there's no way to like automate that. But you can have like, as we did here, we can have like a hook for it. So the whole point here now is like, okay, so now I'm able to just change this, right? All fun. And then I can do use counter. And this is just me, like I'm doing something more complex with my state, right? So now I can do use counter, but now I should have a problem changing it. Yeah, because now it's read only. But if I start using state.increase, which is valid, and now I can change it, right? No tricky overriding methods or anything. It just does what it's supposed to. So that's really nice. And the point now is that you can even like, if I now wanted a single counter, I could create a context for that and I could expose it to my whole app. And just use the primitives as is. And then for use effect, we need to expose some stuff. I'm not actually exposing the observer. So we need to actually, I'm glad we did this the last time, where in package JSON, we're gonna go in and we're gonna actually expose observer. Yep, exactly. Other things can use it. So it's just, yeah, literally when you move that state out of the closure of the component, it means you're like delocalizing it. And anything can use that hook, right? And that's the point where you actually want to control how that state changes. Delocalizing, I never used that word before. So I'm very, very happy about that. What were we doing? Yeah, we were just making sure that we can use observer. So now we should be able to like import observer from Bonsify observer. We might have to restart. Oh, I thought that would work. Isn't there an observer in there? There is. Why did you not work? Import observer, observer, observer. That should have worked. This is weird. This should have worked. And why does it look like... Why does it look like this? Why isn't the... Oh. sorry. Why does it look like this? It's not supposed to look like this. Like this should have like bubble plugin in it. Why doesn't that work? Like where does it grab its... Oh, wait a minute. Is it because... Oh, sorry. It's grabbing it from... Sorry. It's grab... Oh, of course. Sorry. Let's see. We have to change it here. Oh, wait. What did I do? This is the Vite project. Does it have a Bonsai reference? No. But I find this super weird because inside here, this one. Oh, sorry. This was pointing to observing React. Is it because I haven't like explicitly... But anyways, I think I can just go dist ESM observer then. I'm not sure what this is, but I think we're good. No, we're not good. It's not able to find it. Yeah, this is so weird. It's just, it should be this, and this should work. I have no idea why the TS server isn't picking it up. Oh, and then we have... Yeah, this is super weird. Oh, it's still wrong. Missing specifier in Bonsai. What the fuck? We did this. I find this very weird because we've done the... Oh, could it be... This is super weird. Maybe it's because it built... Does not provide an export name observer. But we did this in the other project. I'm very confused by this. But you know what we're going to do instead? We're just going to release a new version of Bonsai where that thing is actually exposed. So we're going to allow others to like use the observer. That's a simple way to fix it. Yeah, it's internal. So let's just do that. Expose observer. Let's publish that. Oh, come on. By the way, I'm building this really awesome project, but I'm not confident about how to move on. It's basically, if you think about LLMs and how they can respond with like JSON mode. So instead of like just text, you can give it like a kind of a format. Oh, fuck, did I? You can give it like a format. And I kind of done the same, only that it gives like a format of Excalibur drawings and like reasoning steps. So it's like it responds with reasoning steps, but tied to Excalibur drawings. So it's kind of like just a different way of consuming a question. So whenever you ask it, it will, instead of just returning a bunch of text, it will rather like take you through steps of drawing on a whiteboard, where it just flips between like, okay, I'm going to draw something, let me explain this step, then I'm going to draw something more, I'll explain some more, I'm going to draw some more, I'm going to explain some more. It's very, very cool. And it's like, it took me a day and it worked surprisingly well. I have it on my other computer. Yeah, maybe I can show it. Let's see if I can find the link here. Let's see. Actually, I think I have it here. Yeah, I can show it here. I'm not sure if you can hear my system audio. Am I sharing my system audio? I don't think I am. Am I sharing my system audio? Where do I see that? Settings. Audio. Speed. Yeah, capture system audio when sharing the screen. Okay, let's try it. So the point here, it's kind of cool. I'm just going to play it.
Let's start by understanding what addition is. Addition is the process of finding the total or sum by combining two or more numbers. Now let's visualize a simple addition problem. 3 plus 2. We'll use objects to represent numbers. Count all the objects to find the total. This represents the sum of 3 plus 2.
Yeah, so like the point isn't that that output was amazing, right? It needs to be fine-tuned to actually give give proper outputs, but that just that flow of drawing, talking, that's very, very cool, because that's something that we humans are quite used to. It's a type of information input, like a medium, I should say. And what's interesting about it in a educational context is that if you think about a whiteboard session with a colleague, that's very powerful, right? That the both of you are standing in front of a whiteboard and you're talking and drawing and talking and drawing. Very, very powerful. The biggest challenge with using AI for that is that both of you as colleagues, you go in with a preconditioned context. So you already know a shit ton of what you're going to talk about, right? And that makes that conversation very efficient. So if you were going to replace one of these people with an AI, that AI would need a shit ton of context to be able to discuss with you. So I don't think it works very well for that scenario. But in an educational context, it makes a shit ton of sense, because you are the one that doesn't have any context, right? You're coming in there to learn, and you basically go into that session to build up a context from scratch. The only thing you have is a question. And that makes AI so much more powerful, because it has more context than you, as opposed to the other way around. And then kind of being able to do educational content like that, and then have that interaction back where you get like, it's basically a teacher, right? But the way that teacher operates is that it's bound to this structure of draw, talk. It's very cool. And it's very cool to use Excalibur, because you can interact back, right? Excalibur is so accessible that you can very easily like move things around and add stuff to it and kind of have this conversation. But I think like the proof of concept is good enough to, like, as you saw there, like the output isn't like amazing, but it's there. Like the flow is there. So I think like to push that project further, it will need to be, I will have to fine tune a model. And And I was thinking about how to efficiently do that, because there isn't any like existing content on the web that has this like conversation of I ask a question, it provides like steps and drawings back, right? But what I could do is that I could use a more powerful model, and I could ask it to find a range of topics for education first. And then I have a lot of topics, and I could make it like present some questions related to those topics. So now I have topics with a bunch of questions, and then I could shove that into another reasoning model, and it would build up the steps. Like what steps do we need to go through here to best understand this topic? And then when it's doing that, I can take all these steps and I can shove it into another reasoning iteration where I ask it to create drawings for each step, right? And then I have like a bunch of stuff. I have a bunch of like questions and steps of explanations with drawings. And then I could even like go through them and evaluate them. Like, is this good? Is this bad? And at the end of the day, I'll just have like a bunch of questions and responses with reasoning steps with drawings. And I can use that to fine tune a model, a cheaper model. That's what I want to do. Because I've never actually done fine tuning before. I never like really found a use case for it, but this is the perfect use case for it. And I don't think I'm also thinking about like using agents for this. Like you have like a supervisor agent that kind of, okay, let me go and ask this agent for like a summary of the topic, and then this other agent is gonna split up that topic or that summary into reasoning steps, and then another agent is gonna create the drawings. It would just be too slow, I think. But if you'd rather have a model that just knows at least how to output something, at least that would be the next natural step. And then the last step would be like actual agents. But yeah, how does it draw? It actually just returns us. So there's a JSON output for the LLM. And that JSON output is just an array of objects where each object has like a reasoning, which is just the text that's like translated to voice. And then it has an array of elements. And those elements are simplified Excalibur elements. And then I have some logic in the client that converts those simplified elements into actual Excalibur elements. It's very cool. And also the voice, even though it's a little bit like, I don't think I have the right implementation in the client to process chunks of audio, but everything's streaming. Like even the steps are streaming. So that array of JSON of steps and text and drawings, that's actually streaming in. And then as those objects are streaming in, I'm streaming in the audio for each step. So it's very efficient that way. But yeah, the audio is a little bit weird, but it's really, really cool. So I hope to do something with it. But yeah, that I need to create like a script that uses OpenAI reasoning models to build up these basically fine-tuning data. That's the goal of the script, is to build fine-tuning data. What were you doing? What voice thing was that? Yeah. Let's see if we can now use. Oh, Wait, what the fuck? Why doesn't reactive have read-only anymore? Oh, I forgot to build it. How many times am I gonna do? Why doesn't the pre-published script run when I publish? It's silly. We need to figure that out. It's hit me so many times. Let's see. Yarn Bonsify. And we're gonna ask why is not my pre-publish script in package JSON running when I publish? There we go. Okay, sorry. We're back at it. So now we can now grab the observer as well. Hopefully, observer. Cool. So we can actually implement an observer. So use effect takes basically a callback with an optional either void or it takes like a disposer. But now we're not gonna have, oh, how does this work? But now we're not gonna have any dependency array, right? That's the whole thing. We're just removing all the dependency array hooks. But we need to have an observation context around it. So we're gonna do we should be able to just do observer, new observer. Can't remember how it works. So observer dot track, stop tracking, and then we do stop tracking. I think this is it. Let's try it. Cool. I'll check it later. Let's see. So if we wanted to do use effect here, we can do this, and then we can console log state.count, I think. Let's see if that works. Oh, I think it's just the cache here. Hopefully. Oh, come on. What the hell is this? Oh, sorry. That's the thing I removed. Export observer from. There you go. Sorry. No, not here. Here. I've removed it. Sorry. My bad. No. You're dead. God damn it. There we go. Oh, that's weird. So why didn't that work? Observer, new observer. I can't remember how this thing works. Oh, sorry. We also need to actually observe. No, wait. what does it need to do? Observer subscribe, I mean, sorry. So what's the cleanup thing? So we need to, sorry. Dot and unsubscribe. Subscribe, CB. Oh, wait. Server.subscribe and then CB. So the point is that no, wait, how is this gonna work? Yeah, the point is that this observer wasn't built for these kinds of primitives. So what we really want to do here is I wonder if we need to go and grab that other component, that use computed thing, because what we really want to do here is when we subscribe, we want to run the callback again, but that callback should be setting up a new observer. So last time I used like unsubscribe. Let's see. And then let's see. Create observer. I wonder if I can do this. And then it's rather create observer. Yeah, but since we're in the same new observer. Yeah, and then we need cleanup would be void, but it's like maybe there. Can I do this? No, I can't do this. No. Or undefined. So we would have to, how should we do this? We need to, every time we create an observer, we need to unsubscribe from the previous one, and we need to run any cleanup from the effect. Why are you complaining? Oh, sorry. Oh, is it void? Yeah, okay. So when we create the observer, we clean up the previous thing, then we create a new observer, we create the stop tracking, and then we subscribe. And then whenever we actually unmount the actual effect, then we're gonna make sure we clean up and unsubscribe the last observer. One thing I believe is an issue here. No, that's not an issue. And then we have to create the initial observer. Like so. Okay, let's try this. There we go. So it gave 2 zeros because of the effect, like strict mode, but then it has the effect. And like the overhead of doing this is the observer, right? But that observer is super, super, super tiny. It does not do much work. And it's a super tiny overhead compared to what you save in reconciliation. So you kind of, yeah, because reconciliation isn't only about like CPU, it's about memory as well, because you're creating a shit ton of objects that just needs to be disposed. So that observer is nothing. Okay, so now we have an observer. We don't have to do layout effect, but then we need to do the memo thing. So memo in this case isn't like, well, it's the same. It's like heavy computation, right? So let's just copy this, and I wonder if we can like do something very similar. So this would be a callback returning some data, but we don't have any depths. Use memo. Yeah, so the tricky thing here is that we do need to also use state, because there's no way to like rerun memo without passing it a new value. So I think we're just going to look at the, was it here we created it? Like this use computed thing? Look at that. Yeah, and then I even used an effect there. We're going to review this, if this is actually necessary. So react.useState. React.useMemo. Yeah, and this will be a callback. So this is like, this is pretty heavy, right? Compared to the other one. Because it's using a use state to keep track of the, but here we could, oh, you know what I think we could rather do here? We could use sync external store. Let's see. So React use sync external store. So we're gonna have, yeah, so the thing here is like we're creating like a new observer every time for the memo, which we don't strictly need. We only need to do it. Yeah, that's the tricky thing here. We can't do this because we have to define the observer with the scope of the currently computed value. And then whenever that observer triggers, we need to go and kind of rerun the memo, right? And the way we do that now is that we're using this effect where we subscribe to the observer of the memo. And then to be able to trigger a recalculation, we use this state thing. But you know what? We could maybe rather do, no, we can't do that. Yeah, but I don't quite like this because what it means is that like we have a use effect and then, no, it's, well, it depends, right? So if this computed was actually looking at a value that the component is also looking at, then it would like first reconcile the component because you looked at count, for example. But then it will trigger the effect as well. Yeah, no, so it should be the same because you're basically running two use states synchronously. So it wouldn't matter. Yeah, but let's just use this implementation. Let's see. And I think this can be done much simpler. Like we looked at the Preact implementation, and if I had like a different observer, I like actually implement this reactive primitive to work with React, I would do it differently. Yeah, how would I do it differently? Well, I would have an actual computed in the library itself. But at the same time, yeah, I wonder how that actually works in, because if I remember Priya correctly, they just used memo. With a computed, didn't they? Because that's weird to me if they did that. No, they probably didn't. I think they just returned a computed. And you can do that because currently here, the reactive primitive isn't like, it doesn't have a cache, right? Oh, wait, no, they do that because they use memo with computed, and then and that's not to do the caching. That's just to actually have like keep the computed reference, and then they have the dot value, right? So dot value is the thing that accesses, and that dot value will update whatever it derives updates. So it kind of like has an internal observer. Yeah, so maybe that will actually be a better implementation here. Is we would just create like a computed outside of this that would actually do caching. But then how would React update? Thinking. Because if you don't have, like, if you can just define a computed, yeah, the point is, yeah. So a computed is like, it doesn't, so when the component observes, it doesn't only observe reactive primitives, it also observes computed primitives, and computed primitives acts like a cached reactive. So that's the difference here, is that we will kind of have to create like, and even that computed could be used outside of React, whatever. But yeah, point is that we don't have that, so we're just doing this for now. The point is that use memo should really be used when you really have to save compute. So we can try something else. So maybe we can do like, or wait a minute, we can do, how can we test this? Derived count would be use memo. Yeah, and we're gonna check if it runs. Oh yeah, you know what? It actually needs to be a proper implementation of a cached value, because the whole point is that if the return value doesn't change, then it shouldn't flag itself as dirty either. So even though the actual computed runs again, it wouldn't signal an actual change to the computed. So yeah, it's like a very flaky implementation. But we can still test it. So we can do like, state.foo. We can have like a foo here. Foo. And then that can become... Why doesn't this work, by the way? Oh, sorry. So we can return foo, derived foo. So I think, why is this? Ah, fucking linter. Yeah, that's interesting. So this will be derived foo. And then what we're gonna do is introduce another button. Did I protect it now? Yeah. Toggle foo. Let's just add that. State.foo. Yeah, whatever. So the point is that I should be able to increase the count without this memo running again. Why didn't... oh, the right count. Great. Yeah, so you see that? It doesn't run the... But there it runs the right count. Runs it twice though. Yeah, it's because of strict mode. So that works, but it's not like the proper implementation of it. You could argue it's good enough though, because it already does the computation, right? So it doesn't matter. Yeah, like I think it's fine because it does the computation, so it might as well like just reconcile again. But you could make it even more efficient so that even though it returned the same value, but it's unlikely, right? When you have a memo, you typically return different values if something changes in the memo. So yeah, I think that will be fine. Why doesn't it have the same? Yeah, whatever. Yeah, so that's like another issue. Now, what's interesting about all of this is that you could now shove this counter into a context, right? And it would just kind of work, right? In the sense that you don't need to use like any kind of memo or use callback or anything like that, because it's all part of this state object. So so for example, if I were to do, let's try this. This is going to be interesting. So let's call it like state context equals create context. Yeah, let's just use React and the famous null. And what we're going to do is, okay, actually let's do new file counter, or yeah, counter TS. Let's just move all of this stuff. Counter. So we would have use state. Oh, suddenly it doesn't understand it. Counter. Create React. So we have our counter context, I guess. And what we would do is, instead of doing this, we would do like counter, and we would even export it. Export function, and then we do export function. Yeah, I guess counter provider. Use counter. Oh my god. Return. Use context. Counter context. And then we would not return this. We would return counter context provider. Oh, this would need to be TSX. And then the value would be read-only state, and then children. It's such a shitty API. Or it's so low level, I mean. I could have simplified that a ton. Yeah, whatever. Any. So this is what you would do instead. It's kind of the same thing, but instead of just returning use read-only, you would provide that use read-only as a value on the provider. That's the only difference. Why are you complaining? I hate ESLint. I'm just gonna delete the thing. Oh. Use counter. Cool. And then in the main file, we're actually gonna counter provider. We have the app, and in the app, we can use the counter, and we can do some trickery here. Console.log render app, and then this is the good part. It's like we're gonna have a different function for our foo. And this foo is also going to use the counter, but it's only going to consume the foo. So we're dropping the derived. We can keep that one. And then we're going to rather render our foo component. We can still change the foo from the upper component, but it shouldn't render app again. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Okay. So now we have render app, blah, blah, blah. If I change the count, it only renders the app, right? And if I toggle foo, it only renders foo. Isn't that cool? And that's exactly what you expect, right? Yeah, so this is interesting. The whole challenge is more ergonomics, I think. And then if you move up to like having this wrapping context, maybe that's fine. Yeah, and I also think like what you can also do is not use a context. So what you do instead is you just do, again, we move back to like use counter like this. Because the point is to kind of just do this at the top, right? So you do use counter. Again, we're just going to return use read only like this. And then we're going to drop the context. We're going to drop the children. We're just going to use the counter at the top here. So we could have like, what should we do? Like whatever, function app state. App with state, something like that. And then we're going to return actual app, and then we're going to pass it some state, and that is use counter. So now we're effectively like initializing the state at the top. But we have this strong contract, right? So app gets like state, which is this return type of use counter. And then you will kind of have to do the same here. But now you have an actual contract about the state. So here we will need to just pass the state. But the point now is that you can safely like pass this state down, because it's not like before it was immutable, right? So the state object itself would change if the state changed within the context, but that's not true anymore. Now you can just expose it and it should behave exactly the same. And it does. So if you think about like embracing React, it's very interesting how we kind of move these primitives outside of React. But we can also say, when you want to handle things globally, just move it to the edge of React, right? At the very top. You just expose the state as is. Or, so what you can also do here, which is also very interesting to avoid this problem with strict mode, is that you know that the only place, so you do this instead. So you put the, so app with state will only render once, right? So you can feel safe that any initialization you do here, that's gonna happen only once. So you won't have that freaking cleanup issue. If you were to instantiate something here, you can't safely discard of it in React because of strict mode. But here you know that like the very top of your app is gonna only render once. And then all the dynamic stuff happens within here. So you just move your strict mode. And now you've kind of you're using the same primitives all over, but you're doing it in a much more performant way and not so mind-bending way, because you don't have dependency arrays anymore. So that is certainly interesting. But the biggest problem with this, I think, is the whole, like, how do you actually expose these primitives? Do you like, I guess the most non-intrusive way to do it would be to like not wrap React itself, but you do like use reactive state and use reactive read only, for example. Or you would maybe you would do use store, but then you have the effects. Maybe you would call it something else, like use reaction or something. So you would have like these and then use computed. Maybe that will be a thing. And the cool thing is it's the same composition model, right? So at the very top, you can have like a single state store, but you compose it up by hooks, right? So it's the exact same model. Yeah, it's very interesting. The thing I like about store instead of use state is that you're encouraged to put methods in there, which a store represents its kind of state and its methods compared to just use state. Yeah. So the kind of nice thing about this is that you leave React as is, but then you you leave React as is, but you just give some additional primitives. and it still operates within. Um, but I guess the thing that's tricky about this is that the whole thing that's tricky is that you're not marrying to one concept, right? So maybe you would use a reaction and you would point to a use state, right? But that wouldn't work. So that's the biggest challenge, is that no matter what we do with React in terms of observation and mutation, it just goes against React. Like, that's not what React is about. And that's what I mean by like forcing you out of the mental model of React. But that doesn't really make sense. But then React has this amazing ecosystem of components and stuff. So you want to keep using them. But you just want to enforce this mental model that's based on observation. But that means you need to hide React itself. It's very tricky. Very tricky stuff. It is very tricky stuff. Like, would you bring in like a linting rule in the package? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's tricky. But that's something that's up for reflection, I guess. But this was fun. It's like, this is the first time I kind of felt like by enforcing, like, you're still in the reconciliation loop, but you're still using observation. You can compose state management at any level in the component tree. Well, ideally at the top, so you don't apply strict mode to it. But you can just use the hooks pattern. It's just that instead of using reconciling things or reconciling hooks, you use reactive hooks. But then what do you do with the rest of the system? Or like, how do you most efficiently enforce that mental model? The thing that I think happens is that even though you hide React behind a package like this, so if you actually install it in a proper project, you won't be able to like use state, because React would be installed inside this package. Like in node modules, this package would have its own node modules with React, so it wouldn't be exposed. But if another package also uses React, which is highly likely that you're going to install another package, the way these these package managers work is that they're going to move React into the root node modules, and then suddenly you can start importing use state again. So to me, I would state that it would actually have to be like a linting rule, that we're gonna mark use state, use memo, and use effect, use layout effect. We're gonna mark all of those as like, these are bad primitives. Because you can't mix them. That's the problem. Yeah, it's interesting. It is very interesting. Yeah. Like, but I just don't see that happening, right? That's the thing. I just don't see that strategy being valid. Like hiding certain hooks because they're deemed bad from like the most popular framework, like, or view library in the world. Like that's not gonna happen. Links? What's links? Oh, yeah, the React Native thing. Yeah, I saw a little bit. I didn't see much of it. But there was this other, because it's using native binding. Yeah, because you have three different approaches. You have React Native, which is like converting. It's basically using the, what do they call it? That package that actually translates, like React DOM is basically like mapping these virtual DOM nodes to actual DOM operations. And then React Native is doing something similar, converting these virtual DOM nodes or virtual tree nodes to actual native things. But then there's something else happening there. Like it was something about the threads, like where things happen. But anyways, and then you have like Flutter, which is actually drawing like a canvas and simulating native looks, which is just, it doesn't feel the same. But this one is truly like native, as I understand it, which is cool. But then it had like a lot of weird stuff. Like you would, just like you use server in, yeah, just like you use server, you would like use background or use background only. Like you would actually give hints about what thread to use in different hooks and stuff. That seemed kind of crazy. But yeah. Um, yeah, but I think I'm gonna eat some lunch. This was very interesting. I'm just not sure how to apply it to React. Yeah, I'm really not sure. I guess you could like use, like, how would you actually do that? Yeah, exactly. Use state never gets used. Yeah, so it's kind of like, what's your, if you were going to sell a product, what would your strategy be? Would it be uh like the product is the mindset of like observation, and how would you like convince people? Like you have your observation bible and you're knocking on the door and you want to convert someone, like what do you tell them? Do you tell them don't use state, use effect, or any of these things, just use mobex externally? Or do you say, oh, but I have a better use state, use effect, the signatures, they are without dependency arrays, and if you install this package, uh, just don't use state from React, use state from this other package? Or do you like remap it, like you mentioned, I think, Adam. Like, do you install a package where you basically like override use state, but you also need this global definition, type definition that overrides the type of these functions. So you still use state and use effect and everything from React directly, but there's like this global type definition. I'm not sure if that even works. That overrides the. But maybe you don't have to override the. Well, you have to override the type. Well, you don't have to override the type, do you? That's interesting because you can call useState. Yeah, you can still like. Yeah, that's interesting. You don't have to override the type because the type is the same. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You want a component. That's also such a bad thing about hooks. It's not only like having the dependency arrays and wrecking your brain. It's that we lost lifecycle hooks, which is just from like a developer experience perspective, it's just horrible. Like not reliably being able to do something when a component mounts and when it unmounts. It's like literally something popping into existence in the UI and something moving, like dropping out of the UI. Like not being able to do certain things in those events, because those events are real. It's just the way React works doesn't allow you to hook into those events, which is just horrible. Oh yeah, so yeah, because how does this compat? Yeah, sorry, we should have looked at that. Preact, React, compat, compat. How do they actually work? I remember doing this with, was it Inferno, way back in the day, setting up compat. To preact compat. Yeah, but that's, yeah, but compat is more, yeah, but maybe you could do it differently. Yeah, so how do you, but what actually happens? Like, how does it setting up compat? The alias. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, as you said, just use an alias. That one's interesting. So if we don't have to do anything about the typing, we could do an alias into observing React. We didn't have to do anything about React DOM. Like only need to do like React goes to observing React. And then that package just exports everything from React as normal, except use state, use effect, use layout effect, like those hooks that requires dependency arrays. They will be observing instead. But at the same time, it's like what if someone jumps into that project and you're using this different type of use state and use effect? It doesn't have dependency arrays, and you put like methods inside your use state, and then you also have this read-only thing that doesn't come from React. Like they would be very confused, and that's the whole problem. It's like if you create something separate from React, you can at least say we're using MobX, right? Yes, it has a different paradigm and all of that, but then they know that coming into a project, okay, we're using React as React and we're using MobX for MobX. But if you start changing out how React like behaves, React developers are going to be very confused. So then it's better to just name it something else. But you still want to take advantage of the ecosystem, right? So you still want to be able to install any React package. And you don't want to break those, right? You don't want to make them necessarily observers, or they can't be observers. So you only want to do this aliasing for your project. Well, aliasing is for everything, also any third-party packages. Yeah, it's tricky. It's like we're using React in observation mode. Like you're, yeah, literally like consuming React in a different mode. But yeah, I do think like the best, or at least the clearest, like no confusing way of using it would be to like have a package that has hooks, but those hooks are like part of observation. So you would like import use store, use read only, use reaction, use computed. Like then it's clear in the code that what's like observation primitives, and then if someone uses a use state somewhere, that's fine. But there's no like, but then you have like someone might try to use like some use state with like a use reaction, for example, but that's like I think that's much less of a problem. Yeah. And like, how would you introduce it? Like, you have the Bible, you knock on the door, and you're saying, well, you have these primitives in React, but they're very inefficient. Like, I'm exaggerating. They're not inefficient, but they don't scale, and they're confusing with dependency array. Like, how many times have you not gotten into performance issues, or how many times have you not been confused by dependency arrays? Here's this package that has observation-based primitives or reactive primitives, or observation hooks, or observation-based hooks or reactive-based hooks. So instead of using useState, you can use store. And blah, 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 blah. And instead of use effect, you're going to use reaction, and it doesn't have a dependency array. And if you use something from a store, it's just going to update whenever anything in the store changes. And the same for like computed. So I think that's a much simpler like way to convey it. It's like instead of use state, use store. Instead of use effect, use reaction. Instead of use memo, use computed. Yeah, and I guess that's like how comfortable can you make that band-aid? Like, what do you tell them about that band-aid? Like, it's quite rough for someone to adopt MobX, for example, because it's just like, especially if that package includes like using classes, for example. But what if you say I have some hooks that scales and that scales better and doesn't have the pesky dependency arrays. And you don't have to use immer. You can just mutate as normal. Like, that's the thing. Like, when you have use state, use effect, and use memo, you have this overhead of dependency arrays. You often use immer, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and you use callback. Like, that's a way to think about it. It's like, okay, you have all these hooks, and you can just describe those hooks. And then what if you could just use these hooks instead? Yeah, you could even have like a table, right? Those are nice with 2 columns, and you kind of just compare it side by side. Like how they did with there was this very popular presentation of like how does RxJS observables compare to signals. And it's kind of the same thing we're doing here. It's like, okay, how does use store compare to use state? How does use reaction compare to use effect? How does use computed compare to use memo? That is the one pager. And then that's what you get out of the library. And it just scales so much better. It's like you still do the same hooks composition, but you can now do like that hooks composition can be moved up to the root of your application and it be exposed to the whole app without ever worrying about performance or anything. That would be a fun exercise. That would certainly be a fun exercise. Maybe we can do that. I'm gonna eat some lunch. Maybe I'll do another stream. We'll see. I have a session with a couple of colleagues, but I'm not sure when that's gonna happen. I think it's in a couple of hours. So yeah, I'm gonna eat some. We're gonna do this. I'm gonna eat some food. I'm gonna do another stream, and we're going to try to like. We're gonna name these primitives. What did I name them? Yeah, use store. We're gonna have use read only. We can have like use read only store, use reaction, and use computed. Yeah. And then of course we have like export function, use layout, reaction. It's the same thing. It's just blah, 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 blah. It just uses the use layout effect. Because not all hooks are bad. it's like you have something called like use deferred value, even the use hook. Like all of these hooks are, it's not like hooks themselves. It's when they're just certain hooks that puts you in a bad state. And then what I would also do in this thing is, well, maybe that doesn't matter that much. Yeah, I was thinking about that context thing, but that doesn't matter. Yeah, and then like, okay, so you prefer a global state store. Well, just put the hook at the root component, or like your state management hook at the root component, and just pass the state down or pass it through a context. And then put strict mode around your actual app. And then you can do exactly what you want. What's also interesting about that is you could like safely, yeah. What's interesting about that, if you do it at the root outside of strict mode, it technically means you don't have to do things like use ref or anything like that. You can safely, because you know that those scopes or those closures will only run once. Oh yeah, the problem with on mount hooks is that you can't do it. It's technically impossible. Well, that's not quite. The problem with them is that you're not guaranteed that all components mount. So what React does is that it can go in and actually run the component body. But it will never mount a component because of concurrent mode. But I guess if you do, what's the thing? And you have to get out of strict mode. So I guess you can like do an on mount for a use effect, but only if it's not, only if you don't have strict mode, or it will run twice. And also if you're on mount, yeah, no, I guess that's fine. Yeah, and another problem is like if you actually like, for example, maybe you have a use state or something and you do yeah, strict mode doesn't help, but it does enforce what the React team thinks React should be. So if you try to introduce a hook that doesn't work in strict mode, you're basically introducing a hook that should never be introduced in React. That's why strict mode is there, is to tell you that you're doing something you shouldn't do. Like, so what you can do is like, so the problem is that if you, for example, create something, maybe you have a use state callback or something, and you create something there, like an instance, you can't safely dispose of it on unmount. First of all, in strict mode, it will run the callback of use state twice, so it actually instantiates twice. That's a problem in and of itself. But if you turn off strict mode, so it only actually runs once. Like maybe you use a memo to instantiate something, you're not guaranteed that the on unmount hook will actually run. So you do a use effect that just returns the disposer, right? So you can't dispose of the thing you created in the memo. That's not guaranteed, because React in concurrent mode might actually run the component body, prepping it to be applied to the DOM. But because of concurrent mode, it breaks out of it because something else happened, and that's not a valid component anymore. And it will not run, it hasn't even run the effects yet, because that happens in a different phase. So you won't be able to dispose of it. So It's just that if you express on mount and on unmount, it's not guaranteed that they will run. But that could be fine, right? If your on mount is basically start this subscription or whatever, and then like you return the disposer for that subscription, kind of like use effect with an empty array. That makes sense. That works. But it might never start the subscription. But that's fine, right? So it's basically, it's more related to instantiation of things you want to get rid of when you unmount. So as long as you do everything within the effect, like start a subscription and end a subscription, you're fine. Yeah, because Inferno doesn't have concurrent mode. So and that's the thing. Like I wonder about this whole concurrent mode. Like, did concurrent mode come from the fact that React enforces you to do state management immutably? So what if, like, at the point where like functional components was introduced and they were sitting at the table discussing hooks, and someone said, you know what if we use reactive primitives instead? We could make components by default not reconcile, and then we use reactive primitives instead to determine when they actually need to change. Maybe concurrent mode wouldn't be necessary. And then you would have like proper lifecycle hooks and all of this stuff. I wonder, like, yeah, because this very, like, the reason I say it is because it happens so often. Like, everyone can relate to digging into one thing and not being able to like step out of the hole and kind of look around and see, is there a different way we can do this? You kind of marry to this fundamental idea, and then you try to solve everything within that idea instead of like, oh, maybe there's a different way to do it. Yeah. So, but yeah, maybe we should, let's, I'm so hungry. I have to eat. But yeah, I'm gonna eat and I'll set up another stream and we can do like set up like a table and then compare them and kind of just see how that looks like. Just basically just create like a readme for it. That would be fun. Like we could add the readme here and then, oh my god, no. New file, readme. Observing React. And then, yeah, just kind of try to pitch it and see how it feels. That would be fun. And it is very interesting how you can use the same composition. Like, so again, like that's the whole reason for the Bonsify thing, was to use the same composition model for functions and hooks for actual like state management that's observation based. But you can flip it around. You can rather bring the observation parts into the existing functions and hooks. And then it's just a question of like, at what level do you expose the hook or the result of the hook? Because I think hooks often has been seen as like one level deep. So when we think about state trees and like nested state, you haven't kind of thought about like how would you actually do that? How would you actually do that with hooks, right? Because you create one hook and then you expose that. You don't think of hooks as potentially like a nested state tree, but they can definitely be that. And they're so much more powerful than having like just this single state tree over here, which is just this huge ass object. And then you have all the functionality over here, because that causes all the issues with like what functionality is available in what state and all of that stuff. But still, like having that like state tree is like as a mental model is really great, but I think it has a bigger cost. Anyways, yeah, let's do that. And then, but I think like the biggest problem is like, what if you create like this store at the top of your app and then you pass that store down, right? And then you have a component that just receives store, maybe. Or maybe even just call it counter, right? And then you start consuming that counter state in like use reaction. But then the counter wasn't a store, like it was a state, use state. And now the reaction doesn't work because it's not able to observe, because it was using use state and passed down to a child component. That's the thing. But that doesn't mean it's worse, because you're already experiencing that with use effect and dependency arrays. Like, why the fuck does my dependency array update? Why does my effect run? It's because of the dependency array. And you just have the same problem. So yeah, no, I'm pumped about this. So I'll have some lunch and then we'll do another stream, and then maybe we'll find something cool. Thanks for the feedback and the discussions, and then we'll talk later. Bye bye.